Sony just broke every rule in animation, and what they discovered will change how movies are made forever. But what happened behind the scenes during production even shocked the animators themselves. I've been working as a character illustrator for over 5 years, and I thought I'd seen everything this industry had to offer. The endless crunch, the budget cuts, the studios playing it safe with the same tired formulas. Then K-pop Demon Hunters dropped, and suddenly everyone was talking about animation again. This wasn't just another animated movie. This was a phenomenon that had Spotify charts exploding, YouTube clips racking up millions of views, and an entire fandom materializing overnight. As someone who's spent countless hours perfecting character rigs and tweaking facial expressions, I knew I had to see what all the hype was about. And let me tell you, after analyzing every frame of this masterpiece, I'm convinced that Sony didn't just make a great movie. They revolutionized an entire art form. But here's the thing that nobody's talking about. The real magic isn't in the big action sequences or the flashy K-pop performances. It's hidden in a single scene called Your Idol. And what the animators accomplished there breaks every conventional wisdom about how 3D animation should work. This 3-minute sequence contains techniques so advanced that other studios are probably scrambling to figure out how Sony pulled it off. You think impressive animation is about smooth movements and pretty colors? Think again. What Sony discovered goes deeper than anything we've seen before, and it starts with something called dynamic key poses. These aren't your typical animation keyframes. These are poses so exaggerated and perfectly crafted that they redefine what character expression can achieve. Every single movement in Your Idol is built on poses with such defined silhouettes that you could recognize the emotion from across the room with the sound off. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most animators focus on the big movements, the obvious stuff that catches your eye. Sony went the opposite direction and perfected something most studios completely ignore. They call it keep alive animation, and it's the difference between a character that looks like expensive plastic and one that feels genuinely human. Watch any frame of Your Idol where the characters appear to be standing still, and you'll notice something incredible. They're never actually still. Zoe's eyes widen just slightly as her eyebrows lift by mere pixels. Her mouth curves into the beginning of a smile so subtle you almost miss it, but your brain registers it as completely natural. This isn't accident. Every micro movement is meticulously planned and executed. Take Jinu's intense stare sequence. On the surface, it's just a close-up of his face, but the animators layered in movements so small they're almost invisible. His pupils dilate gradually, his eyebrows pinch together by degrees, and his breathing creates tiny shifts in his chest and shoulders. Remove these details, and the scene loses all its emotional impact. Include them, and suddenly you're watching a character who feels alive in ways that shouldn't be possible in 3D animation. But Sony didn't stop there. They discovered something that's going to change how every major studio approaches character animation moving forward. The secret lies in what they call emotional micro-transitions. Instead of having characters jump from one expression to another, Sony's animators created dozens of intermediate emotional states that last for just a few frames each. When Zoe realizes she's being watched, her face doesn't just change from neutral to concerned. It goes through surprise, recognition, calculation, and then settles into wariness, all in less than 2 seconds of screen time. This technique required the animators to essentially reinvent their entire workflow. Traditional animation software isn't designed to handle this level of detail, so Sony's team had to develop custom tools that could track and blend these micro-expressions seamlessly. Industry insiders are calling it the biggest technical breakthrough since Pixar perfected subsurface scattering for realistic skin. What makes this even more impressive is how they integrated these techniques with their camera work. The Your Idol sequence uses dynamic camera movements that would normally distract from subtle facial animation. But Sony figured out how to make the camera work enhance the emotional beats instead of competing with them. When Jinu's eyes widen, the camera pushes in just slightly, amplifying the intensity without making it obvious. Other major studios tried similar approaches and failed spectacularly. Disney's recent attempt at hyper-realistic facial animation in their last release looked uncanny and unsettling. Pixar's experiments with micro-expressions came across as twitchy and distracting. But Sony cracked the code by understanding something fundamental about human perception that everyone else missed. The real breakthrough wasn't technical, it was psychological. Sony's animators studied how people actually process facial expressions in real conversations. They discovered that our brains don't just see the final expression, they track the journey from one emotion to another. By mapping out these emotional pathways and translating them into animation curves, they created characters that trigger the same neural responses as real human faces. This discovery has massive implications for the future of not just animation, but virtual reality, video games, and even AI avatars. If Sony licenses this technology, we could see characters in video games that feel more human than anything we've experienced before. VR social platforms could finally overcome the uncanny valley that's been holding back adoption. But here's what's really wild about all this. The entire Keep Alive system that powers these micro-expressions runs on algorithms that analyze the emotional context of each scene and automatically generate appropriate subtle movements. The animators don't have to manually keyframe every tiny eye twitch or breathing pattern. The software understands the character's emotional state and creates believable life automatically. Industry veterans are calling this the biggest leap forward since computer animation replaced hand-drawn cells. Major studios are already poaching Sony animators, trying to reverse engineer these techniques for their own projects. But Sony built this system over 3 years of research and development, integrating it so deeply into their pipeline that copying it won't be simple. What's even more fascinating is how this technology enhanced the K-pop elements of the film. The dance sequences in Your Idol required perfect synchronization between multiple characters, each with their own subtle life animations running constantly. Traditional animation would have made this impossibly complex, but Sony's system handled it seamlessly, creating crowd scenes that feel more dynamic and alive than anything we've seen before. The financial impact has been staggering. Kpop Demon Hunters became the fastest animated film to hit #1 on Netflix, and the soundtrack topped charts in 12 countries. But the real value is in the technology Sony developed. Animation industry analysts estimate that licensing these techniques could generate over $1 billion in revenue for Sony Pictures over the next decade. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The entire film was rendered using 40% less computing power than traditional methods would have required. Sony's efficient micro-expression system actually reduced the processing load by predicting which subtle movements would be most emotionally impactful and focusing resources on those details while simplifying less important elements. Other studios are scrambling to catch up, but Sony has a 3-year head start and patents on the core algorithms. DreamWorks just announced a massive R&D investment specifically targeting emotional animation systems. Illumination poached 5 key Sony animators last month with 7-figure signing bonuses. The entire industry is being reshaped by what started as an experiment in making K-pop stars look more believable. But the most incredible part might be what Sony is planning next. Industry insiders hint that Kpop Demon Hunters was just a proof of concept for even more advanced techniques they're developing. Rumors suggest their next project will feature AI-assisted animation that can generate realistic human movement from simple voice recordings, potentially revolutionizing how animated films are produced. The implications go far beyond entertainment. Medical simulation companies are already reaching out to Sony about licensing the technology for training applications. Educational software developers see potential for creating more engaging virtual teachers. Even therapy applications could benefit from AI characters that respond to emotional cues with genuine feeling empathy. What Sony accomplished with Your Idol proves that animation isn't just about making pretty pictures move. It's about understanding human psychology and translating those insights into technology that can create authentic emotional connections. They didn't just make a successful movie, they solved fundamental problems about how to make artificial characters feel genuinely alive. The animation industry will never be the same. Studios that don't adapt to these new techniques will find themselves creating content that feels outdated and lifeless compared to what Sony has achieved. We're witnessing the beginning of a new era in animation, where the line between artificial and authentic becomes increasingly blurred. So the next time you watch K-pop Demon Hunters, pay attention to those tiny details, the subtle eye movements, the barely noticeable breathing, the micro-expressions that make you believe these digital characters have real souls. You're not just watching entertainment, you're seeing the future of how humans and artificial beings will interact in digital spaces. Thanks for watching K-Sweeper. If this breakdown of Sony's revolutionary animation techniques opened your eyes to what's really happening behind the scenes, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the technology reshaping entertainment. And stick around because next week, I'm revealing the shocking truth about why Disney's latest animated film was a complete disaster and how their outdated techniques are killing their reputation in the industry.